No,
You know,
it doesn't look like it's praying.
no, we're missing.
No, there it is.
I love vacation. Putting it up. I love being truly one of the many ministers of this congregation. I know I get to stand in the pulpit all the time, but I love working with and for you all. I love being here. I love each one of you. You are wonderful people. But I love vacation. I like to get away. Don't take it personally, somewhat away from you, but that's not the point. That's really not the point. I like going somewhere, and I love it when Carrie and I, we've been doing a lot of cruising over the last several years, and so we're changing that up next year. But still, I love when we get to go somewhere that is just different. It's just the two of us. We're spending a week together, kind of no cell phones and disconnecting. I love vacation. Those of you who do know me know that I plan my vacations many times, anywhere from a year to 2 years in advance, and I do a tremendous amount of research when I go on vacation. So recently I came across an ad for a vacation that I very quickly thought, no, I'm not doing that. It's by the Black Tomato Travel Agency. Now, this is not a made-up story. I know preachers do a lot of those. This is not a made-up story. This agency has an experience vacation that they call Get Lost. It is a high-cost, high-end, high-excitement trip where you know nothing about what to expect or where you are going. Here's what they say. I'm taking this right off of their website. Get lost to your unknown, uncharted destination. Get lost takes you to unknown, uncharted destinations and charges you with exploring your way through them by starting with the feeling of being genuinely lost. You will be sent out under the distant watch of dedicated support team to find your inner steel, beliefs, and passions, to lead yourself to their journey's end. Commit to taking a trip to get lost without knowing where you're going or what you'll need. Now, I will tell you, and I do have the website if any of you are interested in it. It starts at 15,000 pounds per person and goes to 30,000 pounds. I don't know what that would be in American dollars, but anyway, the bottom line is I'm absolutely convinced that it is not designed for overweight, over 50, out of shape people like myself, and I know that it is way out of our budget realm for us to do those different things. Yeah, I don't think I'm spending 60,000 pounds on vacation. And I definitely, I can't imagine intentionally spending a week being lost. I can't. It's just so not me. I want to tell you of a story that we're going to use as our starting example here in just a moment that you've already been hearing. And I love, Scott knows a little bit of where I'm going, so he helps to plan our worship. Ken did not know where I was going. He didn't say that many of my notes, but both of them brought out a little bit about what we call the Magi, or the wise men, which we are going to take a little bit of a look at today. So I want to take you on a different journey, one where they kind of sort of knew the destination, but more than the destination, they knew the reason for what they were doing. Over the course of this year, we as a church family tried to engage in more spiritual conversations than we have in the past. And it might simply be interjecting Jesus into a situation. Maybe we're talking with someone and Maybe it's something that came up in a Bible class, or you heard it in a sermon, or just something you've been reading in your own daily devotional, and it fits where you are in that conversation, and so you just kind of share it with that person. That was one of the things we were trying to do this year, is just talk more about Jesus. Another aspect of that was to not just interject Jesus into a conversation, but begin to build conversations where our theme, well, not the theme, but the goal of the conversation is to really genuinely want to know, how is your walk with the Lord? How are you doing spiritually? And so sometimes those conversations, and we would work at trying to do those, and whenever someone had any type of a conversation, whether it's interjecting Jesus or having a deeper conversation, we had them fill out these tiny little cards that just said, I had a conversation with, and all they needed to do was put some initials on that conversation, on that little card. And then what we did is we turned those cards into stars. Once we got those stars, we started putting them up around this church building. Go ahead and hit the lights. Go ahead and hit this next. I want you to see the stars, the conversations that we have been having. Just take a look around you. Stars. These are all different conversations that somebody in this congregation has had. And they are thankful that they just got a chance to talk about Jesus. Go ahead and turn the lights back on if you want. Not if you want, everybody will fall asleep if you don't, so please turn it on. And I won't be able to see my notes. You might be here today because someone wanted to just worship with you. That's really what their heart's desire was, is have an opportunity. And whether you're here all the time or whether you're just here today, we just wanted to have a time where we said, okay, all of these stars, these are souls of people. These are people we care about who either already know and love the Lord and we get to have a conversation, or maybe they are of people who haven't come to know the Lord and we want to have that conversation, and we were able to begin to have that conversation. And wherever you fit into all of that, we are thankful you are here today. So we called today Star Sunday. We picked this particular day in part because I know next Sunday many people may be at their own church family and doing things on a Sunday just before Christmas. So I wanted us to have an opportunity to say, hey, all of these people that you've been talking about, let's take an opportunity to just worship together. So this is going to be a sermon really about stars, maybe better said, about light. And that brings us to Jesus. In many nativity scenes, you have the wise men. I'm going to just make this a little harder for you. You have the wise men that come, and they're bringing the gifts to the baby Jesus. This is just a shot of a nativity scene. And you have a shepherd that comes, and you might have something like that on your mantle or on a table somewhere in your house, or a Christmas card that either you're sending or you have got. And I'm not picking on anybody, but I'm going to just throw it out there. It's not biblical. It's not biblical in the sense that these men weren't there at the same time as Jesus was born, at the same time as the shepherds. I want to talk about their journey for just a little bit today. Again, I know it sounds a little Christmassy, and it is the Christmas season, so I'm okay doing that. We're going to start in Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2, and I'll have the scriptures up on the screen if you want to just follow along there. It says, the first two verses, now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men, magi, depending on your translation, from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and have come to worship him. So here is the thing. We pick up their story far later than it began. They have been traveling from the east to the west, and they have followed, or at least been led by, what they call a star. Now, to my understanding, stars would have gone the opposite direction in the night sky. This is taking them to a different direction, from the east to the west. Now, when did they see that star? As Ken brought out, we have no idea. But there are things that I just wonder, and allow me the opportunity to do that. When the shepherds were out in their field, watching their sheep, when Jesus was born, Luke tells us that a great light shone around them, and describes either the light or at least the scene as an angel who then spoke to them about, behold, in Bethlehem today unto you the Christ has been born. And then this whole host of angelic beings is there. So anyway, this bright light shines around them. And my head thinks, I wonder, I could be totally wrong, I wonder, did those magi see something way off in the west that was unusual? They use the term star. But they're also going to say that this star, as we see when they come to Herod, led them. I don't care how you look at the stars. That one just doesn't happen. Now these wealthy stargazers, these magi, these learned men, sometimes we sing in Christmas songs, we three kings of Orient are. We don't know whether they're kings or not, but it doesn't make any difference. The idea behind it is these people who have some education, some astronomy, belief system, whatever they saw, this star, caused them to believe, we see here in Matthew's record, that the King of the Jews was born. And so they do what makes the most sense to them. That star was there in the east, they're traveling to the west. We saw his star, okay? And so we have come for the purpose of worshiping this king. So they recognize this light source that they're calling a star, but yet in their head they've already translated this as saying, this is different than any normal star. And this star has a significant meaning. And however they did that, they gleaned from that, they understood from that this star was an announcement. A star that was making a proclamation. And that proclamation was about this king that was been born, the King of the Jews. So they do what they would make most sense. They go to Jerusalem, and there they seek out the child that they think has been born King of the Jews. So it only makes sense to go to the palace. That just makes logical sense. If that's what you believe, then you're going to go where you think a king is going to be born. So you go to the king's palace. Herod is the king at that point in time. And so they go there to the palace, and they meet with Herod. And again, these are men of wealth. They have come from the east. They probably have some type of entourage with them. I don't see any reason why the king would not have, in that day and age, kind of welcome them to come in to try to figure out what's going on. So when they get into the presence of the king, and they say, we came to worship the one who has been born King of the Jews, this sets off something inside of Herod. You see, One, Herod knows it's not his child that they are going to see. Secondly, Herod knows. He has enough biblical knowledge. He is Edomene. He is half Jewish. He knows about this Messiah, or in Greek, Christ, that has been talked about, been looked for by people. And so he goes to the religious leaders, the scribes, and he asks them a question. Where is the Christ to be born? And they come back and they say, Scripture tells us, or the text tells us, the Old Testament, I wouldn't say Old Testament, the Scripture tells us that he is to be born in Bethlehem. Bethlehem is pretty close to Jerusalem. In fact, from on top in Jerusalem, and on a clear day, you can actually see Bethlehem. So with that knowledge, he meets back with the Magi, and he tells them that it's going to be in Bethlehem, is where that prophecy is. And he asked them a question. When did you see this star? And they don't give a date, or at least Matthew doesn't record for us a date. But we know kind of the rest of the story. We know where Herod is going to go with that. So he says, go to Bethlehem, worship this baby king, and then come back and tell me where he is. And they're like, well, that makes perfect sense. So our text now picks up. We're going to pick up in verse 9. So once you're told to go to Bethlehem, Matthew begins in verse 9 by saying, after listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. This light, this star that they saw, was not one that was present 24/7. It wasn't there in front of them all the time. It wasn't like the pillar of fire and pillar of cloud that the Israelites used when they were wandering around for 40 years. But it seems to appear at different times as a guidance, as a travel map for them. And now, so they leave Herod, they head towards Jerusalem, and they see the star. So we're dealing again with a nighttime issue. They see this star, whatever that means, and they are excited when they see the star because they recognize that's the same type of different light than what we had seen before. They follow it to Bethlehem, and somehow, and again, this is why I'm saying it ain't no normal star, it pinpoints the very house where Jesus and Joseph and Mary are. Now, that's not a normal star, at least in my book, that's not a normal star. So you got this headlight going down on this house that separates them from everybody else. And when they realize that's where this king is, that they have come to, they are overjoyed. The star led them to the king that they wanted to come and worship. And then we just finish out their story here, verse 11 and 12. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother. And look at this. And they fell down and worshipped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts of gold and frankincense and of myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way. So here's the finishing of their story. They're at this home. They come in and they see this child, this little baby. How old he is, we don't know. We know Herod, due to learning about when they first saw the star, is going to send soldiers in, and I hate to put it this way, but to destroy the children under the age of 2. So there is a timeline that Herod is working with. So it's not a absolutely just born baby here. We're probably looking at a several months or a year-old child that they come before. But when they see this child, they do the very thing that they wanted to do from the beginning. And that is worship. These wealthy, educated men of position from the East, have come because from their understanding, deity, God has guided them to come before that child. And that's really what I want us to think about today. When I ask the question, why are you here? It may be because someone invited you today, simply because we're calling it the Star Center. It may be that you grew up in this church. It may be that due to work or whatever, you moved to this area, you were looking for a church, and you found this, and it became your church home. You are here, and here's what I want you to understand. You are here, I hope, to worship the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's what you're here. What got you here is the light of somebody in your life. And it brought you to Jesus for the purpose of worship. That's why you came. You didn't come to get a lecture. You didn't come to be beat up by me. You didn't come because everything is going wrong. Maybe you did, and you're looking for some way out. You came because you want to worship Jesus. And there is a place that really, truly, God has led you. And I would say to you, don't take that lightly. Over the course of this year, we've been using stars, light, as symbols of some of my sermons and talking. I want to just share with you 3 passages before we close out today. I want you to take these passages to ponder, to think about. The first one is found in Philippians chapter 2, beginning in verse 14. Philippians 2, beginning in verse 14, makes this statement, do all things without grumbling or questioning, that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation. Now look at this. Among whom you shine as, depending upon your translation, either lights or stars. When Paul writes to the church in Philippi, he says, you know what, we live in a world that is so counter to God's will. But here's what God has asked of us. As believers in Jesus Christ, as disciples of Jesus Christ, he says, I want you, you're living in this crooked and twisted generation. I want you to shine like stars in the world. And then the next phrase, beginning of verse 16, holding fast, holding out the word of life. That's what we do. That is what believers in Jesus do. They want to be a light that shares the gospel, which really is better translated by what it means, the good news. I want to hold out good news. There's enough bad news in the world. Carrie yesterday went to a cookie exchange over at Tammy's house, and all the ladies were over there. When she got back, I said, I actually made some banana bread that turned out really good, but that's a side note. And I took a little mini loaf over to my neighbor, and I texted him and asked, would you like some banana bread? And he said, oh yeah. So I took it over and I knocked on the door, and I was talking with Roger, and I gave him the banana bread, and he said, by the way, did you hear there was an active shooter in Hanover today? I'm like, I've been home being Betty Crocker, so I haven't heard anything. I said, no, I haven't. He said, I haven't heard what has happened. But it just kind of came as a shock. This is a town where he and I live. We're neighbors here in Hanover. And you think, there's a shooting in Hanover today? We live in a crooked and twisted generation. Our desire should be, let's hold out the good news. Let's hold out light. Second passage, one that you're very familiar with, Matthew chapter 4, beginning with verse 14. Part of the Sermon on the Mount. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden, nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a stand. And it gives, put it on a stand, and it gives light to all in the house. In the same way, I love this phrase, in the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works, but look at the reason why, and glorify your Father in heaven. It's not about you. It was really never about you. Okay? So I'm this light to this world, and yes, they see the good that I'm doing in this world, but the reason what I want them to see is not Jeffrey is a nice person, or Jeffrey and Carrie are good neighbors, or anything along those lines. I want them to give glory to God. I want them to see Jesus. So I want to live in a way that is so counter to the world that when they ask, why do you behave the way you do, it opens the conversation for me to talk about Jesus. Third passage, and our last passage, 1 John chapter 1. John writes this, beginning with verse 5, going through verse 7. This is the message we have heard from him and proclaimed to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. If we say we have fellowship with him while we walk in darkness, we lie and do not practice the truth. Here's verse 7. But if we walk in the light, as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another. The blood of Jesus, his Son, cleanses us from all sin. Just reading these verses push us to be light. I need to walk in the light. I need to shine like the stars. I need to let my light shine. It pushes us to share our light. Like the Magi that saw that star, they're in the east, they saw it way over in the west, and they knew something was there, and they knew, somehow they knew it was about the one who was going to become the king. The whole point of being a star or a light is to lead people to Jesus. I am so happy you are here today. And as we enter into this Christmas season, or if you're like me, it started November 1st, but as we're in this Christmas season, here's my challenge. Be a star. Be a candle. Be a light. Be who God has called you to be. To bring people to worship Jesus. I'm so glad you're here today. I'm glad that we just get an opportunity to worship Jesus. That's what it's all about. We come together, and yes, we can challenge one another, and we can learn from one another. But the message is that we let our light shine. And the anthem that we can sing to the world is, behold our God, seated on the throne. Come before that God. If we can help you to come before that God, won't you come as we stand there as we sing?